destiny of America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Seder.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
Ever get the feeling you've been cheated?
It is Wednesday, July 10th, 2024. My name is Sam Seder. This is the 5-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, Owen Jones, columnist at The Guardian, contributor at Zeteo on the UK elections. Meanwhile, deer in headlights time as the Democrats face their Biden collective action problem. National Emerson poll, Biden losing ground with independents. Meanwhile, people are freaking out in swing states and maybe in New York. Israel calls for civilians to leave Gaza City after pummeling it with airstrikes, killing dozens who were taking refuge in a school building. Democrats seek criminal investigation of Clarence Thomas because of that whole bribe thing. As UN experts declare famine spreading throughout Gaza, U.S. hopes for one more shipment of aid before it closes its ill-fated pier permanently. Scorching heat taking lives across the country. In Houston, almost 1.3 million without power in the wake of Hurricane Beryl. At the NATO summit in D.C., leaders proclaim Russia now unlikely able to take more of Ukrainian territory. FTC publishes a scathing report of pharmacy benefit managers. Sounds boring, but every single penny you pay for your prescriptions is a function of almost 3 companies. This could mark a possible launching of a formal investigation. And some good news. For the last 2 months, the U.S. is using more wind power than coal power. All this and more. Don't laugh. You get it where you can get it.
Is that because the presidential campaigns are going on?
Nice.
All the wins?
On today's Majority Report. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. It is indeed
Hump Day.
There you go.
Oh my God, it's only Hump Day. Oh my God.
Feels like at least Thursday. Come on.
Yeah, it feels like it's a million years since I don't know when.
Since Biden's brain melted on national TV.
So, folks, it is Hump Day, and blessedly, just a little bit of house cleaning. We're going to be doing some live coverage of the Republican National Convention, which is next week. We haven't quite figured out what we're going to do. All I can tell you is that my understanding is that Ron DeSantis has no speaking engagement, which is nice. And if I remember correctly, the RNC, is it in Florida? Where is it?
It's in Milwaukee.
Oh, it's in Milwaukee. That's right.
Remember? He should force DeSantis to debate him on stage.
Yeah, because remember Trump.
Get up here, Ron.
Crapping on the city. Right?
I think Nikki Haley has not been invited, even never mind to speak. I don't even think she got an invitation to the RNC.
No, her spokesperson said she was not even invited.
Well, no.
I sent the invitation to her husband.
It's really going to be like CPAC. Is really what it's going to be.
Yeah,
but
mixed with a Trump family reunion. Like, I'm sure every member of the family will be speaking.
The only thing that I think is going to be interesting is to see how much they try and project that they don't want an abortion ban, that they've never heard of Project 2025. The Heritage Foundation, what's that? There's going to be, I think there's going to be, well, I don't know. That's really going to be the suspense.
Well, their pivot to trying to look less extreme, unfortunately, is working right now. They're lying, but they're...
Let's see how long they're able to maintain it.
Yes.
Exactly. And hopefully this convention will serve as a reminder as to how insane they are, because right now, obviously, the focus in the media is on one thing and one thing only.
Yeah, that's right. And speaking of that one thing, it really depends on moment to moment as to where the Democratic caucus in the House and the Senate is on this. They're saying one thing behind closed doors. They're saying another thing publicly. It's unclear whether this is a strategic or tactical. I doubt it. But who knows? Here is Nancy Pelosi going on Morning Joe. And when you go on Morning Joe to talk about this, it is clear you have an audience of one. I mean, the idea that we keep saying this, and we've said this for years, but about Donald Trump, and now we have to say it about Joe Biden, it really begins to make you think that maybe there's something wrong systemically. Yeah. But this is the situation that we're in. And here is Nancy Pelosi on Morning Joe. Well, watch, and you can, we will talk about what we think this is.
Happen. So, Madam Speaker, you just went through the president's record, but let me ask you about the current moment. Does he have your support to be the head of the Democratic ticket?
As long as the president it's up to the president to decide if he is going to run. We're all encouraging him to make that decision because time is running short. I think overwhelming support of the caucus. It's not for me to say. I'm not the head of the caucus anymore, but he's beloved. He is respected, and people want him to make that decision, not me.
He has said he has made the decision. He has said firmly this week he is going to run. Do you want him to run?
I want him to do whatever he decides to do, and that's the way it is. Whatever he decides, we go with. I think it's really important, and I would hope everyone would join in to let him deal with this NATO conference. This is a very big deal. Over 30 heads of state are here. He is the host of it, and that means not just hosting, it means orchestrating the discussion and setting the agenda, and he's doing so magnificently. And I've said to everyone, let's just hold off. Whatever you're thinking, either tell somebody privately, but you don't have to put that out on the table until we see how we go this week.
Woo-hoo-hoo! We need you to be Grand Mamala of the country, Nancy Pelosi. Let's go!
I mean, look, I think all this is she's refusing to answer the question and basically in denial that that Biden has made his decision. She is, I mean, this is what she's doing. She's basically saying to Biden, like, we as in the lawmakers, have not resigned ourselves to this being over. However, we are making the tactical decision not to say anything right now so that you can do this NATO thing and contemplate what you're, give this a little more thought. And, there's obviously hurdles for him this week, as in he's got to give a press conference Thursday night. Do we know what time that press conference is?
It's at night. That's the concerning part, since we know that Biden's best hours are between 10 and 4, right?
That's according to reporting. Yeah. But, they're basically saying she seems to be saying, we want our people to keep their powder dry, because at one point it has become clear that this has been completely mishandled by everyone, really, on some level, because there does not, the idea that George Clooney is putting an op-ed in the paper saying this to Joe Biden, where when Joe Biden is out there saying the elites want me to quit and I'm not going to quit because I'm for the little guy. Regardless of what your thoughts are about that in reality, it makes for a good story for him to tell himself and a good story for him to tell other people. I don't know how effective it is, but George Clooney, if he's not going to raise money for Joe Biden, can definitely articulate that to Joe Biden directly.
Well, he said they're trying to ramp up public pressure and I mean, I get what you're saying. It's self-serving, but he also said in the piece that he saw him at a fundraiser a few weeks ago and that he was not the Biden he knew before. He was the Biden we saw at the debate. That's what the op-ed said. So he's not clearly getting through. No, well, I mean, he can. And neither is Pelosi. Well, I mean, he can articulate that, directly. But at one point, you start to hurt the effort to get him out when you're you're a bad messenger for it. Now, I think it's marginal. Yeah. There's an organization called Pass the Torch Biden. I don't know if this is an effort that can go anywhere, but if I'm George Clooney and I have the ability to sink a couple $1 million into something, that's what I would do. I would have it be a more, public outcry. It's just a petition, I guess, and you can call on your members of Congress, but be that as it may, that seems to be now the next level of tactics or strategy that the Democratic lawmakers have, which is, stay quiet, stay like you're unresolved in this situation. Michael Bennett was on television being a lot more forceful, but, Michael Bennett. And so that's where we're at this point. Now, does it make a difference if Joe Biden drops out this week versus next week? I mean, it would be pretty funny if the Republicans had to have a convention all week criticizing Joe Biden, and then all of a sudden it's Kamala Harris. But
that's what I would do.
Yeah, well, I do think that they're hurting at a certain point, though. This is every day that goes by with Biden still in this race is making this about the Democrats as opposed to talking about Trump and trying to defeat him, which is, I think, everyone here's primary motivation. And you mentioned this earlier, but Cook Report, which is really well respected in Washington, has now moved Minnesota, New Hampshire, from likely Democrat to lean Democrat, Nebraska's 2nd district, from likely Democrat to lean Democrat, Nevada, Arizona, and Georgia from toss-up to lean Republican. And now Politico is leaking out that report, as you mentioned earlier, Sam, about New York Democrats saying we're now a battleground state, which is a bit hyperbolic, but it's also the polls will not stop trending in this direction. And it's just, is Biden going to include the rest of us in this suicide pact, or is he going to go gracefully as he can? Nancy Pelosi is not answering there when he says he's made his decision. She's like, well, not the decision that we want you to be making, right? And Axios keeps saying that Pelosi is one of the only people that can get through to Biden. So that's what I think she's doing there. And politically, we have a lot of issues with her, but at least she does somewhat have a sense of what's practical.
And who knows what Hakeem Jeffries and Schumer are doing? They're just who knows. Right. But this is the situation we're in. At one point, they start to realize. I mean, that's what's going on here. This is a massive game of chicken, except for it's cumulative, right? I mean, if one person turns off, then okay, both people survive in that situation. But the problem is that the more people come out and and I'm talking about like the Hollywood stars or even lawmakers come out and attack Biden without actually ending his presidency, the more it damages his chances of winning. this is the dilemma, right? When you come for the king, you've got to deal them a death blow or you're in trouble.
And another quote about kings from George R.R. Martin is, "Any man who must say I am a king is no true king." And Biden and basically Pelosi coming out and trying to half-heartedly cheerlead for how well Biden's doing at NATO, or how Biden is having to come out and defend himself. I mean, even the fact that he has to do that is hurting the Democrats and his candidacy. The weakness that this portrays is repellent to voters who are not necessarily as engaged. They just they think that this comes off as a crap show, and it's like, oh, I know Trump's bad, but damn, they've been lying to us the whole time about this. It creates a whole new set of problems that just don't need to be there for the Democrats, and the polling is going in one direction. And I'll also say, if you want to say democracy's on the ballot and democracy's so important, the fact that I know there's no democratic mechanism right now, but not listening to people and going into closed rooms and making these determinations outside of what polling and what constituents say also does not signal an openness to democracy, because democracy is also responsiveness.
I know, but I don't know if that, I mean, in terms of what constituents say, people voted. Now, they didn't vote this week. They voted over the past 6 months. But it's, I think, at one point, these decisions are going to have to be made behind closed doors. And it's really just a matter of encouraging this guy.
There's one decision to be made behind closed doors, and it's Biden saying, I'm not going to stand for a second term. Like, he needs to make that behind his own closed door and come out and tell us about it.
But voters made that decision without having all the facts. Information was withheld from the public.
Who knows where he was 6 months ago?
Sure.
I mean, there's never been an election in the history of the country where the voters had all the facts. I don't think that exists. So it's hard to sort of say we're not going to trust that primary as opposed to any other primary. I mean, believe me, if it was up to me, I would be making the decision as to who's the nominee, and we would have just been finishing Sanders' second term.
Yeah, you should just call your buddy Soros and get this over with, Sam. It's getting,
I know it.
Getting ridiculous.
I should have spoken to Soros a long time ago about this. Folks,
donations too.
In a moment, we're going to be talking to Owen Jones, columnist at The Guardian, contributor at Zeteo. In addition to elections in Iran and in France, of course, there were elections in England last week. And we will be speaking to him about that in just a moment. First, I will tell you that there is, particularly in this heat, I mean, in general, I don't have time really to do a huge amount of cooking. But in this heat in particular, there is nothing like being over a stove when your air conditioning is broken and realizing like your main goal is not to sweat in the food that you're preparing for your children. See? And but on top of which, I don't have time to do this on a regular basis.
Right.
I don't have time to cook. There's an easier way. And I will say this also, for a long time, I did not want a microwave. I had no need for it. And boy, have I realized why a microwave is great. Why? Because Factor meals not only can provide you like all sorts of different types of menus if you're like concerned about calories or protein or keto. These meals are not frozen. They are dietitian approved. They are ready to eat in just 2 minutes. That is why you have a microwave. After 40 years, I realize now. So no matter how busy you are, you're going to have time to enjoy nutritious, great tasting meals. And in my case, you can provide them for your kids. I want to thank Factor for supporting the Majority Report and ask you, what are you waiting for? Get started today. Have a feel-good week of meals ready to go. Head to factormeals.com/majority50. That's majority50 and use code majority50 to get 50% off your first box plus 20% off your next month. They have 35 different meals, more than 60 add-ons to choose from every week. You're always going to have new flavors to explore. You got wellness goals. You can crush them with dietitian approved meals and ingredients you can trust. They have breakfast. They have dessert. You can treat yourself to restaurant quality meals that feature premium ingredients like filet mignon, shrimp, and blackened salmon. I had a Cajun salmon shrimp dish with like a chopped, what do they call it? Cauliflower instead of rice. And it's fantastic.
Yes, much better for you too. Yeah.
Much better for you. Enjoy effortless support for your lifestyle. Choose from 6 menu preferences to help you manage calories, maximize protein intake, avoid meat if you want, or simply eat well balanced. Head to factormeals.com/majority50, majority50, and use the code majority50 to get 50% off your first box plus 20% off your next month. That's code majority50. That's the word majority and the numerals 50 at factormeals.com/majority50 to get 50% off your first box plus 20% off your next month while your subscription is active. We'll put the link in the podcast and YouTube descriptions as well as at majority.fm. Quick break. When we come back, Owen Jones, columnist at The Guardian, contributor at Zeteo. We are back. Sam Seder, Emma Vigeland on the Majority Report. Joining us now via the phone or the computerized phone, Owen Jones, columnist at The Guardian, contributor at Zeteo. Owen, welcome to the program.
Hey, guys, you know what? Bit of mysterious, just add a little bit of, I don't know, je ne sais quoi. Sorry I'm hiding. I had a little doctor's thing, and I look as demonic as my critics tend to think I am. Well, but I thought that would distract slightly from the content.
We've done most of this show without having the vast majority of our episodes have been like this. So it's no skin off our back, as it were. So, all right. So British elections, give us a sense of where we were 3 weeks ago in terms of what was anticipated was going to happen in English elections. And then maybe you can explain to us exactly how this all works.
So we have this again. We have first past the post. It's an electoral system quite similar to your own, which often gives slightly weird results. So the country, the United Kingdom, is divided into 650 constituencies where they're supposed to have roughly the same amount of voting population, and the winner is the candidate that gets the most votes. So if they win 30% of the vote, and they come top, they've won. First past the post. That's how it works. You know the drill in terms of states and your elections and how that works. So Labour was on course for a colossal landslide. That's because the Conservatives just destroyed themselves. No government in democratic history in Britain has ever so comprehensively self-immolated. Whether that be the worst squeeze in living standards this country has had in the modern era, a squeeze in living standards, I should say, that's significantly worse than most of the Western nations. The average Briton is, on average, at least basically around as badly off or worse than 2010. We've seen the collapse of our National Health Service, the public realm in general. We've seen multiple scandals. Boris Johnson collapsing, obviously, his administration in when he broke the rules of the pandemic, when people couldn't hold the hands of their dying relatives. We had Liz Truss, who came to power with a really hard right lunacy, this kind of economic agenda of cut the taxes on the rich. Very unpopular, but that crashed the economy. It sent mortgages and rents going up. So the point I'm making is it's just a unique set of calamities, which meant that the Tories were finished. Some of the polls suggested the Conservatives might actually lose their position as the official opposition, that the Liberal Democrats would take over instead. And it was widely predicted that Labour would get well over 40%. That's what Labour got in 1997 under Tony Blair when they won another landslide. That didn't happen. Labour won a landslide, should be very clear about that. The rules of the game, the electoral system, are you win the seats, you've won the election. It's as simple as that. But Labour won a third of the vote. And in fact, Labour didn't just win a third of the vote in the end. Labour won fewer votes than Jeremy Corbyn got in 2019 when Labour was routed. Labour got, as a percentage, a lot less than Jeremy Corbyn got in 2017. They got 40% then. They only got a third this time. And the reason for that is the Conservative Party collapsed. You got the rise of Reform, which is a hard right party, as I'm sure you all know, Nigel Farage, a close associate of Donald Trump with very similar politics. So what was slightly odd about that is you got a landslide, but on a turnout as well, which is the lowest for 23 years. You also got the rise of the best results of the non-Labour left in British history. So the Green Party, who stand on the left prospectus broadly, they got their highest ever vote share. They got about 2 million votes. They only got 4 seats, but that was 4 times more than they had. They came second in dozens of seats, so they're ready to take them off Labour the next time. And you also got independents that won, standing on particularly anti-genocide platforms. So 5 of those won, not just standing on the issue of Gaza. One of them, of course, was Jeremy Corbyn, the former leader of the Labour Party. He was driven out of the party by Keir Starmer. But you also got 4 independents who often disproportionately won the supports of Muslim voters, but not exclusively. 2 of Keir Starmer's allies lost their seats. Another one, his heir apparent, nearly lost his seat to a young British Palestinian, 23 years old, independent campaign. He didn't even bother campaigning in the seat most of the time. He didn't realise he was in any danger. He nearly lost it by 500 seats. So it was an odd one because they thought, the polling suggested they were getting over 40% of the vote. But they didn't get anything like that. They got way less. And now we've got a lot of client journalists in this country, the kind of sorts of journalists who are not even it is much worse in this country than the US, by the way, in terms of journalists just crawling up the backsides of the government of the day. And in the case of the Labour Party, a lot of them are just acting, they're claiming, well, actually, this shows the genius of Labour strategy because they may have won a huge majority on a low share of the vote, but that's because they weren't piling up votes in areas they didn't need. The idea they were aiming to get a landslide on 33.7% of the vote is ludicrous, and people comparing it to a Jenga tower. Because if you get a landslide based on such a tiny share of the vote, on such a small turnout, less than 60% voted, around 60% voted, what happens next time when your government, governments don't generally become more popular when they're in office. So what happens next time? And the question there for Britain is it the hard right Reform Party who are going to swoop in and take a lot of Labour seats? Or could the left, using this as a foundation, get their act together? And I think the left has a lot to be very optimistic and cheerful about in Britain.
Okay. So, and just to be clear on that first past the post, is that is whoever wins a plurality, or is there an actual specific number that you need to hit?
Yeah, so you need out 600. You need to get first past the post there's 650 seats. To get a majority, you need 325 plus one, obviously. Yeah, right. So 326 seats, you've got a majority. That can obviously have disproportionate, like in the US, you can win the popular vote and lose the election. Right. So that's happened, for example, Labour in 1950.
Well, I guess I'm asking in specific constituencies, which would be like, I guess the equivalent to our, congressional districts on some level. Is it simply a plurality that you need, or is it a specific number? Theoretically, if you've got 7 people running there, somebody could win with 20%.
You could, if you had 10 people running, we could be hypotheticalized. If you had 20 people running and they almost get the same, that you could win on 6%. Right. Yeah, there's no rule at all. Okay. You just have to get the most amount of votes. That's it. That's how you win the game. So which is why you could be a political party that gets 20% of the vote. And if you get 20% of the vote the same across every single constituency, you will not win a single seat. Whereas you could end up, as an example, the Liberal Democrats, this time round, they got pretty much the same share of the vote as they got last time. But last time round, they only won 11 seats. This time round, 72. They won 72 seats, and they got about the same votes and the same share of the vote. That Labour got almost the same share of the vote as last time. So they got almost the same share of the vote. This time they got 411 seats, and last time they got 202. So they got twice the vote. So they got twice the number of seats on almost the exact same share of the vote, but with fewer votes. I know it's ludicrous. Yeah.
No, it makes some sense. It makes some sense on some level. I'm curious as to where. So if most of the sort of these seats that other parties won, did they all come from the Conservative Party? Or how many? And some of Labor, I guess, went to Green. It's amazing because Green has the 6th highest vote total, but like the 10th lowest amount of seats. So it gives you a sense that there's a lot of popularity for the Green candidates where they ran, I guess.
Exactly. So for example, YouGov, the pollsters, they did a survey before the election. And what that found was, if tactical voting wasn't at play, what would happen is Labour's share of the vote would plummet. So Labour are inflated by tactical voting. It's important to say that because a lot of people are saying, well, Labour's vote share was so low because of tactical voting, because people are voting for Liberal Democrats, for example. That's not true. According to this poll, Labour's polling goes down by 8 points if people don't think they have to tactically vote to keep out the Conservatives. The Greens double. The Greens actually more than double. The Greens go up to 13% when actually they won 7%. So a lot of people now who would have voted for the Green Party did not vote for the Green Party. And I have to say, the Green Party don't have a visible leadership. Most people voting Green don't know very much about the leadership. They're winning almost blind on the basis that they're seen to be a left of Labour political party. They've got 2 co-leaders for a start, and very few people will be able to spontaneously name them. I know them, like Carla Jenny. I think she's very good. And so the point, what's interesting is the Greens actually won 2 seats from the Conservatives. They're rural seats, but they're exceptions because they have come second in loads of urban Labour seats. These are seats in inner London, like the one I'm sitting in, where last time round they got about 3%. This time they got 17.5%. They didn't campaign here. So they won huge shares of the vote in areas without even bothering to campaign. Because there's a pool of progressive disillusionment with Labour, which did not exist in the past. That didn't exist under Tony Blair at all when they came to power. This is a very different situation. There's that's why there's something to build on.
How many? How many seats in Parliament will be held by folks who are to the left of Labour, or would otherwise be in Labour were they not dissatisfied with Starmer's leadership or what they perceive he was going to do?
Difficult one to adequately frame that, because would some of the independents necessarily have joined? I mean, there are 5 independents which you could say are kind of, they're kind of left of Labour candidates. And just to make clear just how difficult that is, or how rare that is, since 1950, there have been 8 successful independent candidates in a general election in which a political party didn't stand down for them, for example. 8. 5 of them were elected last week. So it's really important to make that point, because it's extremely hard under our system to win, obviously, in the same way it is for you in lots of ways, if you're an independent. So it's very rare. And so you get Jeremy Corbyn plus 4 others who are who mostly focused on Gaza, but didn't exclusively focus on Gaza. And they are disproportionately drew from often communities with big Muslim populations. But you also get the Greens 4, so that's 9. But you also get left-wing Labour MPs. They did try to start purging them all, but they didn't succeed in that. So, for example, Jeremy Corbyn's shadow chancellor, his right-hand man, John McDonnell, when Jeremy was leader, he's still an MP. Zawal Sultana, a young, sort of compared to the kind of squad in the US, she's still a Labour MP. Nadia Whittome, Clive Lewis, these are left-wing Labour MPs. So you actually do get, there are now, I don't know, there are probably 30 left-wing members of parliament without going into what I would call the soft left. So you do have a contingent now of maybe 30 to 40 left-wing MPs. I mean, there's a Scottish National Party who had a battering. They were dominant. I think a lot of people maybe often saw them as left-wing, in which you do get left-wing SNP MPs, but they're civic nationalists. They're focused on independence. You also get Plaid Cymru, who are a Welsh nationalist party with about 3 MPs, who also stand on the left. They're a left-wing nationalist party. But yeah, I think there's a contingent, a larger contingent than expected. I think that's the way to put it.
And can you explain to the audience what has been happening with Labour, the hollowing out of the left post Jeremy Corbyn, which might give people a sense of why there's dampened enthusiasm, even though on paper, obviously, Labour won?
Yeah, well, I mean, look, to be honest with you, if they thought Labour, they were only going to get 33.7% of the vote, they would have been devastated by that and terrified, I would imagine. And what happened is Keir Starmer stood in 2020 on the basis that he was basically going to be a professionalised Jeremy Corbyn. He stood on a very similar domestic prospectus: tax the rich, public investment, nationalisation of utilities, abolish tuition fees for students, don't support illegal wars, have human rights, the sense of foreign policy, reverse privatisation of the National Health Service. I mean, he U-turned on the whole lot. He also promised the broad church and then started to purge the left and change the leadership rules to try and stop the left ever being able to stand for the leadership of the Labour Party ever again. But also started, before that, when the election started, they tried. For example, they purged someone called Faiza Shaheen, who was a left-wing Labour candidate who would have won under the Labour banner on the left. They saw her as a kind of AOC. She's young, she's a very talented, charismatic, telegenic, working class woman of colour who defied the odds, became a very successful economist. So huge numbers of people on the left have left the Labour Party, including people who voted for Keir Starmer under on a false pretense, I suppose. So what happened is you've got a mass exodus of people on the left from the Labour Party. What's interesting actually is there's been this again caricature, I suppose, of, you get this over there, don't you? But is the left are kind of like bourgeois bohemians and their students and all the rest of it.
Yeah.
And Keir Starmer actually, unlike Tony Blair, who never spoke about class and thought talking about class was bad, and Keir Starmer appropriated the idea of class politics, but often to batter the left. Kind of portraying the working class as socially conservative, wave a load of flags, talk about migrants in a pejorative way. That's how you win them over. And what's interesting is the polling shows that Labour lost support in areas of deprived communities. That's where they lost support, principally, poorer communities. The reason they got over the line in the end in the way they did is, the Conservative vote collapsed. They got their the lowest number of seats since they were founded in their modern form in 1832. And that's partly because of the Reform Party to their right, but the Reform Party don't just, of course, take Conservative votes, they also take Labour votes, unfortunately, as well. And you also had a drop in turnout. But what's happened is the Labour leadership now stand for, they oppose taxing the rich. They oppose. They're to the right of Biden on economic policy. I think it's very, I should just be very straightforward about that. They had one distinctive policy, which was modelled on Bidenomics, which is a £28 billion a year clean investment fund through borrowing, but they dropped that. They trashed it. And on Gaza, they stood for, Keir Starmer backed the right of Israel to cut off energy and water to civilians, then gaslit everyone and claimed he'd never said that. He's the most dishonest politician of our age alongside Boris Johnson. He lies and lies and lies, and the media facilitate that. It is absolutely astonishing behavior. So I think what's interesting is he's less popular. He's the least popular leader of the opposition to ever win a general election by a long way, I should say. He's less popular than Jeremy Corbyn was in the 2017 election. I know people go, look, well, good. Losers don't win any prizes. He might have been, Labour got a higher share of the vote. They got a lot more votes. Jeremy Corbyn was more popular. You lost. Get over it. I get that. Fine. But the point is they are starting from a level of extremely low enthusiasm. They only won by default. That's why they're in power. They lost because they won because the Conservatives lost. And the reason that's a problem is this country is in its worst mess since 1945, when it was reduced largely to rubble by the Nazis. For example, at the moment, we've got a looming £20 billion a year black hole in the nation's finances. If that's not filled, notwithstanding an aging population, that means more cuts on top of the cuts we've already had. And Labour's ruled out it hiking taxes, and they've kept the same fiscal rules as the Conservatives. So what are they going to do? They're going to, they're already not popular. They're popular amongst newspaper columnists, my colleagues. Oh, they love them, but they're not actually popular amongst the general population. They've won by default in a very difficult situation without answers to the country's problems. That's the issue.
So where do they go? I mean, they have a governing majority, a sizable one. So they'll be able to presumably execute, a political program. I guess, what is your sense as to which direction they go? Because I'm just thinking about, in this country, obviously it's a very different system. The last president we had to win not a majority, I mean, aside from our electoral college stuff, but I mean, I'm just thinking back to the Clinton era where Clinton won with 45% of the vote. And it basically brought about a strategy called triangulation. Now, it doesn't work the same way. He doesn't need necessarily. I mean, it sounds to me like Labor doesn't necessarily need to go to the progressive bloc if they become a bloc, or a left bloc, they become a bloc for votes. But where do they tact ideologically? Do they see more opportunity in getting more votes from sort of like conservative, from Tory voters who might be, disaffected with a completely sort of, a diminished party, or what? I mean, where do you have a sense of where they'll take this if they're aware of their weakness?
Well, it's a very good question, isn't it? Because, I mean, the Conservative rump now, given it's only 23.7% of the vote, I mean, that really is what is left. That's the kind of hardcore Conservative till I die, isn't it, really? I don't really see how you scrape from that. Reform would actually, you could argue more likely in that you will have parts of that will be working class voters who are disillusioned and have been won over in this case by a right-wing anti-migrant agenda. But, if we go back to 2015, Farage's then party UKIP did very, very well. Theresa May, the Conservative Prime Minister, called an election in 2017 expecting those voters would just vote for the Tories and therefore Labour would lose very badly. But actually Jeremy Corbyn's Labour Party won over a lot of Farage's supporters in 2017. Of course, voters don't work on a left and right basis. They're often disillusioned with the system, and it's which politician are you most convinced with who expresses that disillusionment. The problem is Keir Starmer. I don't see why Keir Starmer's leadership would ever appeal to them. And the issue, a former Blair advisor called John McTernan, he actually said, well, look, actually, we need to look at the votes lost over Gaza in the same way we looked at those lost over Brexit, because Labour lost voter, working class voters, not just working class voters, but voters in Northern England and the Midlands over Brexit, and then everything was thrown at winning them back. And he's saying we need to do the same over Gaza. The problem with that is the people at the top of the Labour Party are just, they will think to themselves, if voters are disillusioned because they think there are too many migrants, that's a legitimate concern. If voters are angry about Israel committing genocide in Gaza, that isn't a legitimate concern. That's what they don't, these people are ideologically pro-Israel. These are the sorts of people who, that wing of the Labour Party, the sorts of people, when Eurovision's on, they'll dress up waving the Israeli flag to piss off the left. These people hate the left. They're actually different from New Labour's founders in the sense they're just obsessed with hating on the left. They don't have any interest in understanding voters who've peeled off. And I think that's why they're hubristic. I don't see how they're going to win back, because Tony Blair pissed off a lot of, for example, Muslim voters, but that took years, had Iraq and all the rest of it. Keir Starmer did that before he was even in power. So a lot of Labour's electoral coalition, younger progressives plus Muslims, we have a larger contingent of younger progressive people. Urban areas have moved to the left compared to where they used to be under New Labour. And that's because you have a housing crisis and lots of younger people in insecure jobs and their living standards have been done over. So they're receptive to a more progressive argument. But Keir Starmer's leadership isn't interested in catering to that. I mean, the programme they've got at the moment, they're throwing everything at a house building programme, which is basically funneling a huge amount of money to private developers. That's their argument for growth. That's how they think they'll get growth back. That they will override Conservatives who are NIMBYs, not in my backyard, and build a lot of housing. The problem is this country hasn't built the houses we need, except in the era when we had the public sector building housing, but they're not proposing to do that. So I think that, the problem is they don't actually have this. A Labour advisor told me in the election, if you're thinking there's some big grand plan hiding in a drawer somewhere, you're going to be disappointed. I don't think they expected independents and Greens to do as well as they did. I don't think they realise more people are going to defect to them because people get pissed off with governments in office, and they were already pissed off before they were even in charge. A lot of people voted Labour to keep the Conservatives out. Now the Greens are in second place in dozens of seats. A lot of those voters will go, well, actually, it's a choice between the Greens and the Labour Party. Now I can choose the Greens safely. So I don't think they've got a plan for that. But equally, I think Reform could take a lot of their seats. Someone joked on Twitter, it went viral in Britain, you can see why, last week. They said, I'm looking forward to watching the British 2029 general elections this Sunday. They were, of course, referring to the French elections. And a lot of the people who are cheering on Macron blindly did the same, cheered on Starmer, cheered on Macron when he became president. They called him the antidote to populism. They said that's what we need here in Britain. Well, Macron oversaw, of course, the rise of the far right. And it was only the left which stopped the far right taking over for the first time since the defeat of Vichy France and the Nazis. So, I mean, unless the left gets their act together, that is, I think, our fate. I think the Reform they're second place behind Labour now in 89 seats.
So, Owen, can you tell us more about Reform? I mean, you mentioned that these, people are probably familiar with Nigel Farage and that he's a Trumpian-like figure aligned with Trump. But what are some of their policies? What are they advocating? Is it basically just anti-migrant hate? Is that kind of their central premise right now?
Well, that's their core. I mean, Nigel Farage came to prominence campaigning to leave the European Union. In practice, despite the critiques of people like myself from the left of the European Union about neoliberalism, that referendum centred on the question of freedom of movement. Because if you remember the European Union, you have freedom of movement throughout the European Union. And the argument was an anti-migrant argument. So he, in 2015, they did really well. They were called UKIP at the time. Then you had the referendum. So in the 2017 referendum, Farageism, that bubble popped because a referendum had been won by Leave, so people didn't see the need to vote for his party anymore. Why did he come back, I suppose, is the question. Well, I mean, it's interesting. Immigration is higher in Britain than it's ever been, which I think is great, by the way. It's good for our economy and it's good for our society. It's a good thing. But if you voted to leave because you hated immigration, then obviously you find that slightly perverse. And attitudes towards immigration overall in Britain have got a lot better. There's no correlation between anti-migrant sentiments in Britain and the level of immigration, but a core of Britain hates immigration. And what the government did is focus on the question of small boats crossing the English Channel from France. These are a very small proportion of the overall numbers arriving. They tend to be English speaking, often from former colonies of Britain. The biggest source is Afghanistan. Britain obviously had one or two things to do there in this century. The Conservatives threw everything at that. Stop the boats, stop the boats, stop the boats. All they succeeded in is whipping up a lot of people to get very angry about migrants and refugees without doing anything to actually satisfy them, and that radicalized a lot of them, and they ended up going to reform on the basis that immigration is their number one issue. They feel lied to by the Conservatives, and they want to stop the boats. When you ask people, some of them, you ask them, they say, let's shoot them all. There is that. But, there are a lot of them. Yes, the core of reform, I don't think most people know anything about their policies. They do have a manifesto. I think they just think, I don't like immigration. That's, I think, probably at the moment, that's the driving force. The people aren't voting for any other meaningful reason, no.
And Owen, give us your sense of where are folks regarding Brexit? Like, what? Is there has there been? How are you mentioned that if you had voted for leaving on the basis of you did not want more immigrants, you'd be rather disappointed at this point. What about the whole rest of the agenda? Where does that sit now? And and if there's been any type of backlash, has there been any accountability or what?
Yeah, there were lots of promises made about Brexit. The focus, of course, was about immigration, which is that was the biggest single reason why people wanted to leave. There's no question about that. And as I say, net immigration now is higher than it's ever been, which is very funny. To be honest, that amuses me. It doesn't obviously amuse a hardcore in this country. But there was also, I guess, a lot of people also saw it as a vote against the status quo. They saw it as a vote against, people looked at that referendum question rather than, do you want to remain a member of the European Union? They saw it as, are you happy with the status quo? Are you happy with your life? And a lot of people voted no. A part of that, the NHS was put at the forefront of that. There was a promise on a bus that there will be £350 million extra for the National Health Service every month or every week, something absurd like that. That became very famous and totemic because the National Health Service has just been in a mess and got worse and worse and worse. So I think the general issue is a lot of people voted for Brexit thinking it would make their lives better. And actually, since then, people's living standards actually suffered a worse squeeze. And the likes of the National Health Service, because of Tory policies, have been hammered. Broadly on Brexit, what we ended up with was the worst possible deal. It was a hard Brexit deal negotiated by Boris Johnson's team, which has caused a lot of economic problems. It has just it's hit the economy. There's no question about that. These are people who pushed it, often right-wing libertarians, who go on about red tape, but in practice it means red tape. If you want to trade with the biggest trading bloc on earth, it's just much harder now. You have to do lots of complex forms, to get things back and forth. There are barriers in place. There are now trade barriers. So it's very unpopular. The polling shows both Leavers and Remainers think it's been a disaster. And I guess, I think reopening the question would be, it'd just be a culture war again, because it became a culture war. It was so toxic for the left because for us, our understanding of politics is there is the working class, or the majority versus the elites. But all of a sudden, everyone was a Remainer or a Leaver. It was utterly toxic and had a catastrophic impact on the Corbyn project as a result. So I don't want to reopen that, and I don't think the left should. And I think the best bet is to come up with a new deal which is closer and tries to deal with those issues. But it has actually, I guess the problem is a lot of people voted for that thinking, I don't like the way the country's run. I'm not happy with my life. And since then, things have only got worse. And that's dangerous in that Well, I mean, there's potential in that if you get a left which gets its act together, it can speak to people and say, well, actually, the reason is because of the economic system. But the danger is you just get a right-wing populist movement who say Brexit wasn't done properly, and we need to get rid of this corrupt elite to make it work.
Lastly, so how does it work? The next elections, British elections, will be in 2029, or they have to be done by essentially this time in 2029?
They can be held no later than the 15th of August 2029. But in practice, that doesn't have to be the case. I mean, the latest this election could have been was next January, and obviously we're in July. Actually, that was completely mad by Rishi Sunak. I don't know why he went so early. If he'd waited, Farage could have just gone off to the United States for the elections with Trump and, just pissed around with him. That would have been, your issue, not ours. But for some reason, but instead Farage stayed here and then launched, a big campaign, which did over the Conservatives. I mean, Rishi Sunak, I don't know if he's an agent of the Labour Party, but I don't know how else he would have, what would he have done differently? But yeah, so it can be before then. I guess a lot of people, the hubris of these people, I think is just worth returning to, because when Boris Johnson won an 80-seat majority in 2019, a lot of commentators were like, well, Boris Johnson's going to be prime minister for the next 15 years. He's master of all before him. Look at him, and the press was swooning over him. Boris Johnson was in power for about 2.5 years, and then he was overthrown in disgrace. We have had now in this country 30% of our post-war prime ministers in the last 8 years. With no change in government, 30% of our post-war prime ministers in 8 years. We live in an age of turmoil and tumult, and I think a lot of people, it was the same. You know what this syndrome was, guys, because it was the politics will be boring again. We can all go back to brunch. That's what made people passionate about Starmerism. Everything's just been this terrible nightmare. We just need the grown-ups back in the room. The adults will be back in the room. Politics will become boring. We can all go back to the 2012 Olympic ceremony when we had this great opening ceremony and everyone lived in utopian paradise because we don't care about all the people who are struggling who don't live in, because this was often about middle class, privileged people in Britain, where politics had never intervened in their lives. And they were like, oh, this is all awful. Make this, make things boring again. And they saw the Tories as vulgar and embarrassing. They didn't really care about the substance of their policies. They were embarrassed. They're embarrassed to go to their second homes in Europe. And people go, oh my God, your government's such a shambles. The point I'm making is, I think those who think stability will now return to Britain, which is, that whole kind of British exceptionalism. Europe is where all the mad populists are. Britain is stable. I don't know if you've seen that. What's that film? Children of Men. The rest of the world has collapsed. Britain, soldiers on. Britain is in a mess. It's in a terrible mess. And Labour doesn't have the answers to the problems. Keir Starmer is a budget Macron. He's a budget Tony Blair. They don't have the talent of Tony Blair and Gordon Brown. I'm not complimenting, Blair. I think he's a walker, but I just mean this, in terms of them as politicians. Right. I think this will end badly. I think it will end very badly, and my fear is it will be the far right which will benefit. So it's got to be the left that gets their act together. France shows that can be done, even though they're not out of the woods in France. The far right could still end up running that place. I wouldn't rule that out. But I think the left has something to build on, and I think the left is actually feeling more optimistic now than they felt certainly in the last 5 years.
Owen Jones, columnist at The Guardian, contributor at Zeteo. Thanks so much for your time today. We're going to link to a couple of pieces that you've written in the wake of the elections. One in particular, comparing what happened in France with what may be possible, at least broadly, in England. And we will link to that at majority.fm. Thanks so much for your time. It was great talking to you.
No, it's an honor, guys.
Thanks Owen.
For listening. Take care.
Great to talk to you.
Take care, everyone. Speak soon. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Okay, folks. Well,
they got some smart folks over at Zeteo.
They sure do. Somebody wrote on the IM, this guy is the English version of John from San Antonio. There is a quality about that.
Yes.
A lot of information. That is their system is complicated, but in some way, at least there's more of an opportunity to feel directly represented, I guess.
I do feel, I guess I'm bit envious of parliamentary systems these days. Just, the ability to call elections, the fact that you can do strategic voting. I know that in the UK it's more Byzantine and not maybe as responsive as other
I even like the
places,
party
but-
discipline where, I don't like the way it was used by Keir Starmer to purge the left, but I think that sort of disciplinary mechanism would be good if you had a party that was actually, let's say, a Labour Party and not sort of a soft conservative party like Keir Starmer's.
The Freedom Caucus just kicked out 2 of its members. One for supporting Bob Goode's challenger in Virginia. So there are, we do have at least some semblance, the caucuses within the House. Now, I would love the Progressive Caucus to start providing some type of litmus test as to whether you can be a part of the Progressive Caucus. I mean, there's no real point to it if you can't count on your members to be on the same page, at least in, even broad strokes as to what, I'm not saying that you need a list of 12 different issues that you have to subscribe to, but maybe 4 might be good. 5. Folks, just a reminder, it is your support that makes this show possible. You can become a member at jointhemajorityreport.com. When you do, you not only get the fun half, you get the free show free of commercials, and you help this show survive and thrive. So if you listen to the program a couple of times a week, you don't have to listen to all 5, but you get so much opportunity to listen to what you want to listen to by being a member. JoinTheMajorityReport.com. What's that?
It's the purest way to support us.
It's the purest way.
Yeah.
There's a lot of other ways you can do it.
But Bezos gets a cut on
What's
Twitch. Bezos gets a cut on Twitch, like Eric Schmidt. And,
Yeah.
So.
But that is free for people if they're already paying for their Prime thing. But join the majorityreport.com. Also, tons of people joined the Discord the other day when we mentioned it. We're over 11,000 now. We actually got a notice from Discord saying, like, unnatural amount of people joining.
Really?
I think so, yeah.
Settle down over there.
Join the Majority Report, majoritydiscord.com. You can be a part of the Discord. And of course, our merch, shop.majorityreportradio.com. We're about to unveil the flag thing, but I think, we had some confusion as to who won because it depends on what metric. And I'm thinking we want to combine them. So maybe
I know that's what you're thinking.
They're hanging chads.
I don't know if I agree. I don't know if I agree with you. We'll have to have this conversation off. I mean, it's just
I'm doing a Brooks Brothers
2
riot.
different logos. This is not good.
No, I'm not saying 2 different logos. We take the flag from one and take the outline of the flag from one and put it in and take the other one that won and put it in the flag.
Sounds a little busy.
In terms of my neurological capacity.
God. Well, I guess
Don't
we gotta
you
have
want
some...
a woman's touch for in terms of fashion? I'm providing it here. This is
I'm
what
a
I'm here
metrosexual.
for.
I don't know if you've been aware of this, but I've been reliably accused of being metrosexual. So,
but we've
Yeah, except those Fashion Week invitations. from
right,
this year,
right.
Sam.
I mean,
also, justcoffee.coop, fair trade coffee, and hot chocolate. You can use your coupon code Majority, get 10% off of this great fair trade co-op coffee. Emma, guess we have to have a conversation about the t-shirt
and my
logo soon.
insubordination.
But this is it's outrageous what happened yesterday on that other show. I'm not even going to name the name of that. What is it? What do they call that?
Office hours. Yeah.
Office Hours Live with that Tim Heidegger, who I don't even think that's his real name. I mean, he just copied some flaw because he wanted to make him sound more important.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I think
it's funny I watched it, and it's funny that this bit that Sam's on to learn that like Tim is sort of not
not
sort
as
of
into
over it.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, Tim doesn't pay attention to it at all.
Well, but I did engage in the bit a little bit. I did engage in it. We
He's
had
sick
some
of it.
fun. We roasted you.
He's completely sick of it.
He just wants to be sincere.
I know.
I think he thinks that like it's sort of crazy what I'm doing.
Well, we were doing, I was making fun of you, very straight face. I got a text from my friend, my oldest friend from like all the way from when we were little kids, texting me, "What happened at work with Sam?" And I said, "What do you mean?" She said, I said, "Oh, it's a bit," because I realized she's like, I got so scared and thought you changed jobs. I was like, wow, maybe Emma's the problem if she's airing this out in public.
This is the Sam Seder School of Comedy, where you say things that just trouble people and make them concerned and ask for clarification.
Right.
Exactly. Exactly. It's really, in some comedy, sometimes you're playing to the back of the room, which is where all the comedians are. And I actually play to the room behind the back of the room.
Creating a commotion that draws people in.
I'm concerning my friends and family by committing to your bit that I'm
just
having
looking massively unprofessional.
issues at work. Yeah.
Emma, ESVN, or you can talk about that other show.
Yeah, you could check that out. Office Hours I was on with Tim Heidecker, very fun. And then also on ESVN, we talked a little bit about the Olympic teams, the WNBA, halfway through the season. Rookie of the Year race is basically a 2-person race. And then we also did some off-season fun, giving tiers for all the teams in the NFL, NHL, and NBA before we head into the season in a few months. It's the slow time, but we can have some fun. YouTube.com/ESPN show.
Yeah. Last night on Left Reckoning, we also got deep into elections, including this UK election with Phil Cunliffe of Off a Bunga Bunga Cast. Phil kind of gets into some of those Brexit class issues, that we sort of mentioned a little bit with Owen up top. So if you want more on that, check it out. And also Seamus Malakafzali on the Iran elections. And I'm just gonna.
What are you doing?
I'm just. We should do that.
Just running away.
Oh wait, no, go back. We want.
All right, folks, we'll see you in the fun half.
Oh, come on.
You are in for it.
All right, folks, 646-257-3920. See you in the fun half.
Are you ready?
Who sent us this?
Anarchy.
Alpha males are back. Boy is back. And the alpha males are back.
Just as delicious as you could imagine.
The alpha males are back. Boy is back. And the alpha males are back.
Just wanna degrade the white man.
Alpha males are back.
I take all of it in my throat.
Alpha males are back.
Snowflakes has what?
The alpha males are back.
You are a madman.
And the alpha males are back.
Oh no, Sam Seder! What a fucking nightmare!
Bring back DJ Danner.
Yeah, or a couple of them. Just put them in rotation.
DJ Danner.
Well, the problem with those is they're like 45 seconds long, so I don't know if they're enough of a break time.
That's fucking nonsense. You see white people doing drugs that look worse than normal white people, and all white people look disgusting.
And the alpha males
psych. Fuck them. Snowflakes says what?
What?